Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to go through some experimenting that I've been doing with the changes that were made in 3.14 to Abyss Jewels. So there's a little note in the patch notes for 3.14 that slipped under the radar for a lot of people. And what that was a change to the way that Abyss Jewel drops work. In particular, there were some new mods added that require high tier, like high item level Abyssal Jewels. And additionally, there was a change made to the way that Abyssal Troves work. So the Troves are the ones that when you complete an Abyss and it doesn't lead you into the Abyssal Depths, that's an Abyssal Trove, that chest that you get at the end. And they almost always have at least one Abyssal Jewel in them. Now, there was a little note in the patch notes that said that the rare Abyssal Jewels that drop that way will drop well rolled. There was no elaboration on what well rolled means. Now, I've done a little bit of testing with lower tier content and found that it seems that the Abyssal Jewels that drop this way will be 4 mod rares. Now, 4 mods is a lot better than 3 mods on any sort of jewel. For obvious reasons, it's just more powerful, but also people don't tend to use Exalted Orbs or Harvest augment mods on a jewel. Usually, this is something, I mean, it does happen, but it's not a common use of Exalted Orbs. And as a result, you find that most of the time people don't modify their jewels. So having that empty slot really does have a high opportunity cost because you could have a mod there. So for that reason, 4 mod jewels are much better. Normally when you ID a jewel, I believe it to be 35% to have 4 mods and 65% to have 3 mods. It may also be a 1-to-2 ratio. So you definitely get more 3 mod jewels than 4 mod in normally from identifying jewels, but everything here should be 4 mod. Additionally, I have gone and farmed up 50 level 86 Abyssal Jewels. So you see here that there are 38 rare Abyssal Jewels, also sort of a mixture of the different types. These will all be well rolled. There's also 12 that are not going to be well rolled, and these are other item level 86 jewels that I haven't identified. What I want to do is identify all of those in this video. So just a very quick recap on how we did this. We were running tier 16 maps that were augmented to tier 17 through the Terror Watchstone, 18 through Misinformation, and 19 through Stalwart Defenders. So being a tier 19 zone, it's monster level 86. Abyssal Troves drop their jewels to be equal in level to the zone that you're in, so to the monster level of the zone. And that's how I managed to get these item level 86 jewels. In order to force that many abysses onto maps, I stacked 2 sources of abysses. So we had the Maven exclusive Sextant mod. Areas contain 3 additional abysses. I didn't roll this myself. I traded for watchstones that already had it. So there's this copy of Terror that has that on it. And the other 12 maps that I've done so far, in order to farm up these 50, that came from a Territories Unknown watchstone, which also had the Abyss mod on it. So that's how we got them to tier 19. We then threw 3 abysses this way and 2 from a Gilded Abyss Scarab. Now you could add 3 if you were to use Winged Abyss Scarabs, and doing this would be an extraordinary amount of XP, especially because we were running this content in New Vestia. I can't show you at the moment because the Conqueror's procced and actually Watchstones have burnt out, so I'm in a situation there where I've got to run the Conqueror map before I can open up my Atlas passives for the region. But there's a couple of Abyss specific effects there. The main reason we do it is for 10% increased chance to have an Abyss, but there's also mods that cause there to be more monsters in coming out of Abysses, and also more XP per monster killed. Side note, you get a staggering amount of XP doing this as well. Although if you're doing it for XP, I recommend not doing it as tier 19. Just don't use these watchstones. Terror in particular makes you die a lot more than you otherwise would, especially if you're playing a squishy character like me. I also threw in Polished Shaper Scarab into each map because that just seemed like a really good return on investment, and it was. But let's go through. Firstly, let's ID these ones and just give a sense as to the sort of mods that roll when you don't have any when you don't have anything causing them to be well rolled. So here we've got just a low tier lightning damage. We've got a decent mod there, the conditional attack speed, but it's with a low tier energy shield, not a good jewel. All of these will basically sell for I think they're 10C or so for item level 86 Abyss Jewels. They're pretty much across the board. And I don't expect... now there's one of the new mods. Motivating. 3% of damage taken recouped as mana. So what recouped means is that if you take a hit for 1,000 damage, then 3% of that, so 30 damage, you will replenish 30 mana over the next 4 seconds. So 7.5 mana per second for the next 4 seconds. That's one of the new mods that's only available on item level 86 jewels. It's not the strongest one. The strongest one is the Impale effect one, and that is incredible. But we haven't got that yet. Again, nothing much here. And this should just give you a sense there's really nothing much rolling here. Increased effect of cold elements could be solid, but you need it in conjunction with other good mods. Global Crit Multi is really strong to have on a jewel, although that's something that you can get on rare jewels, of course. And so this gives you a sense that these item level 86 jewels are not particularly great. However, let's have a look at the well-rolled ones. So firstly, here we have 4 tier 1 mods here. We've got resistance against cold, chill and freeze. Intelligence is unfortunate. Tier 1 energy shield and tier 1 evasion rating. Now, most people aren't going to want the tier 1 evasion rating. So ultimately, I don't think that this is an all-round great package, but you can see potential here. Even though this isn't a great jewel, but it is certainly solid. Interestingly, this is a Ghastly Eye jewel, which are normally minion jewels, but this actually has no minion mods on it. This is all defenses and utility. Murderous Eye jewel here. So we have Crit Multi, which is a very strong roll to get. Cold damage to attacks, fizz damage, and this has an identity crisis. It's doing too many different things, not doing any of them overly well. So unfortunately, Foul Pole is not a great item at all, but if you always got a great jewel every time you ID'd one, then, well, the threshold for what was a great jewel would go up. So now let's have a look at this. This here, we've got conditional... Chance to avoid elemental ailments is an extremely powerful stat. However, when it's conditional, only applies when you've got elusive. I think it's only really a bonus. It's not something you're going to want to rely upon. And so for that reason, I don't think that's a great mod. That is one of the new ones. It's item level 84 requirement for the tier 1 version. I think there's a tier 2 version that comes online at level 75 as well. Fire, cold, and physical damage don't really go well together, and so this isn't a very good jewel. Next up here, we've got again we've got some cold damage to attacks. Reasonably high numbers here. We've got tier 2 cold damage with claws and tier 2 universal cold damage. We've got increased attack speed. Armor is probably a wasted stat, but this is not a bad jewel. This one's interesting in that this is the sort of item that you could consider a remove non-cold, add cold harvest craft on, possibly. I'd need to do some research to make sure that would work. And if it would then, I believe that would be a 50-50 shot to remove either Berserking, which would ruin the jewel, or to remove Carapace, which would make it much better if you hit anything useful at all. But before you do that, you always need to check all of the various mods that can roll. Otherwise, you can be disappointed when when you get something wrong. You'll notice there that we've got 2 to 3% chance to gain Unholy Might for 4 seconds on melee kill. And Unholy Might is actually really strong now. It's 3% chance obviously would be better, but there's a tier 1 version that is 4 to 5% chance. I believe that's one of the new item level 84 and up mods that's available on jewels, on Abyss Jewels. This overall is a bad package, but the higher tier version of Unholy Might could actually put you in a situation where you've got very high uptime on that powerful effect. So that's not a mod to be thinking of as a waste of space. Murderous Eye Jewel here. We've got 3 tier 1 mods on this, but it's trying to do too many different things. So we've got a lot of random elemental damage. I think this is a really good jewel. However, it is incredibly niche. Like, very few people would want this jewel, but for someone that does, it could be really good. If you're playing some sort of unusual build that scales all different types of damage, then this is going to be like the best Murderous Eye jewel you're going to find. There is a unique sword called Rebuke of the Vaal that drops from Legion content that would really potentially like this jewel. And whilst I don't think many people build around Rebuke of the Vaal at the moment, I think this is just good enough that it should be taken seriously. I'm going to put a fairly high price on that because it's the sort of thing that nothing else really exists at that caliber in the league. So if some wealthy player has decided to play Rebuke of the Vaal, then they're going to want Whispering Saw. It's probably going to be the best jewel in the league for them. Of course, that is conditional upon someone with a lot of resources behind them deciding to play Rebuke of the Vaal. Here we've got 4 tier 1 mods, but unfortunately not really all that great overall. Although it's worth saying that there's that mod suffix modifier of Languishing. Enemies withered by you have -2% to all resistances. This is an incredibly powerful mod. I don't think that this jewel is an entire package, but you've got like the tier 1 maximum mana and the of Languishing is a really solid start. Unfortunately, this is really hurt by being a Ghastly Eye jewel. If you had that combination of enemies withered by you have -2 to all resistances and the maximum mana on a different type of base, such as a Hypnotic Eye jewel, then there may be some way to go further with this with crafting. As it is, I don't think this is going to be useful to anyone. Okay, so having a look here, again, we've got conditional increase attack speed of opportunity is actually a really solid mod because you've pretty much always dealt a critical strike recently, so it's like 8%, well, at least on any build that scales crit in any meaningful way. And so I think that this is a jewel that if it didn't have that tempered mod on it, it would be really good. Tempered is basically a dead mod on this item though, because you're adding flat physical damage to bow attacks, but this otherwise is all about scaling lightning damage. And this is the sort of item that if Tempered was replaced even by tier 2 life, this would be an extraordinary jewel. As it is, it's probably good enough to sell, but not at a high price. Okay, so continuing on, we have enemies maimed by you take 5% increased damage over time, which is one of the new mods again. Item of Lady 4 required for that. Pretty oddball niche mod, but something that can be quite solid. You have that interesting increased accuracy rating if you haven't killed recently. Now, these two mods are powerful, but on very different builds. Increased accuracy rating if you haven't killed recently is something that is useful for the accuracy stacking builds that use the, I think it's called Storm Rider boots. They're added in the Ritual League. Unfortunately, though, this jewel as an overall package is rubbish. Ghastly Eye Jewel here has 3% increased effect of your curses. This is one of the item level 86 only mods. This is really, really, really good. Additionally, increased cast speed is a good mod. Obviously, it's divine poorly, but that's all right. Then we have some mods that are just not so useful. Reduced effective curses on you when you're on consecrated ground. I cannot imagine anyone wanting this. This is one of the new mods that was added as well. It's too conditional. And even if you're playing an Inquisitor that has the, well, maybe you could stack a bunch of them. Maybe you could stack a bunch of them on an Inquisitor or a build with Bottled Faith and find a use for it. But broadly speaking, I think it's pretty weak. That said, the Foul-Tongued mod is one of the things that I had my eye out for. I was hoping to see that. There is that, and there is the 5% increased effect of Impales you inflict, which are the two really, really good new mods that were added. Okay, well, just because it's well rolled doesn't mean it's good for anyone. And unfortunately, this one is not good for anyone. Here we've got tier 2 life with a bunch of other mods. No real synergy between the different mods. You got tier 2 life and tier 1 lightning damage to spells is really solid. But then we've got spell chaos damage, which broadly speaking is not very good, and it's a low tier of it as well. Chance to avoid being shocked is, again, neither here nor there, because you probably want to try and get, if you're going to scale elemental ailment avoidance, you're most concerned with freezes and you're most concerned with chills, and getting shock is a bonus on top of that. But many of the things that will make you have a chance to avoid being shocked will also, many of the things that will give you a chance to avoid being chilled or frozen will also give you a chance to avoid being shocked. So I don't think this is an overly good jewel, even though it had a promising start with 2 of the mods. Okay, we got All Res is an interesting one here. Chance to avoid bleeding is something that is often underrated, but you can stack 100% of that, which is quite solid. If you got 5 jewels like this, then you'd be looking, and if you divine them all perfectly, you'd have 100% chance to avoid bleeding, which is a really strong effect. Then we have spell cold damage and spell chaos damage don't work well together. All in all, I'm going to have to say that this is a miss. Murderous Jewel, here we have lots of fire damage, chaos damage, and lightning damage to attacks, and accuracy. So these are really, really high tier mods. They're just really high tier mods that don't work all that well together. There might be, again, there might be some niche that this can fill. I don't see it, but the tiers are so high that this is not something I would let go of cheaply. Okay, we have something that was supposedly well-rolled. This does not feel well-rolled at all, so that one's trash. Enthralling Gaze, Murderous Jewel, we have here basically some medium-tier attack mods. Again, it's got an identity crisis issue with cold, physical, lightning, and fire, but this one doesn't have high-tier mods, so it's genuinely trash. Here we've got a bunch of lightning and cold. So we've got elemental damage to attacks. Unfortunately, nothing really high tier. That's no good. A Murderous Jewel. Now here we've got tier 1 life, which is always good to see. We also have enemies maimed by you take 5% increased damage over time. This has some potential already. This is the sort of thing that I could see if it didn't have that annoying fire damage with dagger attacks mod. If that was physical damage instead, if it wasn't daggers, if it was something else, I could see this being used by some sort of gladiator build. Maybe it'll get there for someone. I don't see it, but this is one of those ones that, I mean, you can tell it's well rolled because the tier 1 life mod is rare to roll, but it's not a good package overall. Here we've got an interesting one. So we've got 2 really synergistic prefixes. 3% of damage taken recouped as mana. Again, that's level 86 only. And tier 2 maximum mana as well. Comes with some cold damage spells. Comes with some stun avoidance. This is a really good jewel. This one is a good example of why we're doing this. This is sort of thing that if it had had life on it, it would have been extraordinary. But then again, you can't get mana, damage recouped as mana, and life on the same jewel. But any build that is playing with Mind Over Matter will find this to be a really strong jewel for them. This here Murderous Jewel has lower tier mod rolls and no synergy, so we'll just walk straight past that one. No need to really focus on it much more. Here we've got the tier 1 Unholy Might, but unfortunately with nothing else. That is a really good mod, but by itself, nah, it's not a good jewel. Maximum mana with the regeneration of mana. Flat mana regen is an oddball in that it's one of those stats that is better than it looks in some situations. However, what's really interesting here is that this has the enemies withered by you have -2% to all resistances. Again, really strong mod. If you can stack a few of those, then you can basically get a lot of extra chaos penetration or elemental penetration. This jewel feels almost like it is made for some sort of Eternity Shroud build, but it's not. I don't think it's quite there. But that mod, enemies withered by you have -2% to all resistances, is really good. Hypnotic Jewel with tier 1 life unfortunately has that annoying armor mod. Has that conditional elemental ailment resistance, avoidance, sorry, and then has fire damage to spells. 2 good mods, 2 bad ones. That's an example of what happens with well-rolled items. The game doesn't necessarily have synergistic mods. It just goes for high tiers and not necessarily for a good package. Minion cold damage, we have mana, we have... this one has the very powerful minions have a chance to blind enemies on hit with attacks. That's stronger than it looks, even at 6%. And enemies intimidated by you is just basically completely useless, especially on a Ghastly Eye jewel, like on a minion jewel. This is not a good package. Okay, so here we go. Again, we've got the enemies withered by you effect. This time coming with a couple of mediocre elemental minion nodes. The prefixes ruin this. The suffixes are fine, but the prefixes are bad. So ultimately, this is not a good jewel. Here we have the Unholy Might, unfortunately only tier 2, and nothing really else with this, so we'll just move straight past it. We have lower tier mods, but again, we've got that really powerful withered mod. Not enough as an entire package. Murderous Sigil, and here we've got the 5% increased impale effect. Now, this is a genuinely rare mod, and it is incredibly powerful. In fact, I think that this is a strong overall package. This is the sort of thing that if that fire damage was life instead, this would be a truly extraordinary jewel. Because what you're wanting, if you can get those 2 prefixes, tier 1 life or even tier 2, with the Lancing, 5% increased impale effect, you've got a great start of a physical damage jewel. Unfortunately, added fire damage with Mace or Scepter attacks just really does nothing for this. And whilst the other mods on it, you've got the conditional elemental ailment avoidance is like okay without being great. And Taunt on Hit is something that has its niche uses. Ultimately, this has one great mod on it. This would be, if it was slightly different, I would consider using a Beast Split on this to try and get the 5% increase in impale effect without the other bad mods. If it had 2 good mods on it, 2 great mods, then I would do that. Okay, so but I was hoping to see that mod because it is one of the top ones that's come out. In fact, it's probably the best of the new mods. Global Crit Multi is really good. Increased damage over time doesn't synergize with that, and the other mods are bad, so that's a dud. Energy Shield and Mana, both very high tier. There are certainly builds that can use that. And then we have the ailment avoidance while you have elusive, which really doesn't fit on a minion jewel very well. It's pretty hard to get elusive on a minion jewel, but still, it's alright. Increase effect of your curses with energy shield. That is already solid. And then the rest of this is, less impressive. This is sort of thing that it's not quite good enough to merit a harvest, reforge this item, preserving its prefixes. But it's sort of almost close to that. The enemies blinded by you have reduced critical strike chance is one of those mods that is really all or nothing. That is one of the new mods again. I think it's one of the level 84 and up jewels only, but unfortunately it's just not quite enough. If you were to get 5 jewels with that mod on it, then and you had some sort of blinding aura like from the Redeemer, there's a Redeemer chest mod that causes enemies near you to be blind. I think it's Redeemer, maybe it's Crusader. That would be an option that you could use to protect yourself against critical hits. And then that gives you a lot of elemental ailment resilience as well, because it's mostly crits that inflict elemental ailments on you. Anyways, interesting jewel, but very solid prefixes. If that was tier 1 energy shield instead, then that would probably merit a harvest reforge preserving prefixes to see if you can get better. Searching Eye Jewel, again, we've got a tier 1 mana roll. For normal Abyss Jewels, there is a bias against getting tier 1 rolls, and it's pretty strong. So the fact that we're getting so many of them is a good sense as to how strong these well-rolled mods are. That said, this is not a useful overall package at all. Tier 2 Life and Impale Effect. That is a really good start. It's such a pity that it's tier 3 physical damage to attacks and then a worthless fire damage to attacks mod. If this was not, if the prefixes on this were higher tier, then this would be potentially an extraordinary jewel for further crafting. Unfortunately, they're lower tier, and this is just not there. Ghastly Eye Jewel with like minions getting a lot of lightning damage. It's not really easy to scale elemental minions from jewels, so I don't really see a huge potential for this. Moving on, we have regenerate a lot of energy shield per second. That mod is nowhere near as good as it sounds, even at tier 1 with a perfect roll like we've got there. And ultimately, this is just complete and utter rubbish. It might say it's an enthralling sphere, but this is actually nothing of the sort. Okay, so 3 left, and we've got a high tier mana, but unfortunately nothing else with it. We have 2 extraordinarily good suffixes together here. So phasing for 4 seconds on kill is extremely strong. It's something that a lot of people forget about on is an option on jewels. This is the sort of jewel that if one of those prefixes that, because the prefixes are quite bad, if one of them was life or mana or ES, I think this would be a really solid jewel. That's not the case. We've got spell and cold, spell lightning and spell cold damage while dual wielding. I think this is solid but replaceable, this jewel overall. But getting the 2%, basically 2% penetration, as long as you are withering, this is sort of jewel that if the prefixes were chaos damage instead, this would be amazing. However, they're not. And the last one here is unfortunately complete and utter trash. So that is 38 of the well-rolled jewels. As you can see, they're all 4 mod rares. There were a number of them that were at least solid, but nothing was truly extraordinary, and a number of the new mods are really impressive. Most particularly 5% increased impale effect. That is an amazing mod. It is rare to roll, and that's why we didn't see it very many times in these jewels, but it's something to look out for. So would I do this again in terms of this Abyss Jewel experiment? Yes, I would. And the main reason for that is actually the crafting bases that you get. I had filled up something like 15 stash tabs with crafting bases that are good enough to sell. So these are all item level 86 and up. So there's Sorcerer Boots, Apothecary Gloves, more Sorcerer Boots, Imperial Claws, Grove Bows, Thicket Bows, plus a bunch of Shaper items and the like as well. The thing that's noticeable here is that there's a lot of gaps in here, and that's because I've already sold enough of those crafting bases to recover my entire investment in this strategy. So I sold, I think it was 30 or 36 Vaal Regalias at 5C each, and I sold something like, I think I sold something like 50 Hubris Circlets at 8C each, and I also think I had some other... no, that was it. But that basically recovered the entire cost of the experiment. And so everything that you see here in these Abyss Jewels, everything that you see in the Abyss Jewels, everything you see in the way of Shaper bases in these, in the remaining tabs here, everything else that you see here is pure profit, some of which will sell, some of which will probably end up finding its way to standard with me because I just can't be bothered accurately pricing everything. And then, of course, it has taken a bit longer than you might think because of the amount of crashes that we've been having lately. But once the game performance hopefully starts to pick up in the next little while, there's been a couple of patches that have solved a lot of problems for a lot of people. I'm finding things have gotten better, but they're not perfect yet. Once that's the case, then I think we will start seeing this being a very, very potent strategy. Either that, or we will see Gilded Abyss Scarabs increase sharply in price until the point that this is no longer worth doing. Anyways, if you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a good one. May your Vaal orbs have interesting results.